Thanks for having me, Paul. Look, I think it's really critical the President-elect Trump has sent that message out. It's a message to Hamas. It's a message to Iran. It's a message to Qatar and Egypt that our hostages, there are 7 American hostages, there are 101 total hostages that have been languishing in those dungeons for over 420 days, and it is time to do a deal and to get those hostages back. And I think this President Trump is warning them that if they don't, there's going to be holy hell to pay.
It's really very interesting because it's a different message than the Biden administration has been sending. Whenever the Biden administration has talked about the hostages, it's been, well, it's time for Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, to do the deal. This is a very different pressure point.
Well, that's right. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it's Hamas that's holding these hostages. It's Iran that is supporting Hamas. But I also think, Paul, it does give the opportunity for the prime minister to find a bit of political space within his own domestic politics, within his own coalition, to do the hostage deal that I think he wants to get done. And I think having President Trump make that very clear, that this deal needs to get done and needs to get done before January the 20th, helps the prime minister both against Israeli enemies as well as against some of the opposition in his own coalition.
All right, let's turn to Syria, where the Islamist insurgents are now making a comeback, taking over Aleppo and most recently, it seems, Hama. Against the government of Bashar al-Assad, which has been backed by Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran and Russia. What do you make of that comeback, and what does it mean for Israel and the U.S.?
Look, I think this was a shock for everybody. I think it sort of came from nowhere. It sort of reminds me of the line that Henry Kissinger once had about the Iran-Iraq war. We hope that both sides will lose, because you either have Iran-backed Assad, supported by Putin, or you have these Syrian rebels who are jihadists and are Islamists supported by Erdogan of Turkey, who himself is an Islamist. So I think this is a complicated situation. I do think that for the United States and Israel, the worst scenario would be for Assad to survive with Iranian and Russian support, because I think that would embolden both the Russians and the Iranians. Very important that the Iranians and the Russians are kept out of it. Thankfully, they are, because they've been so severely weakened, the Russians by the Ukrainians and the Iranians by Israel.
But do you think in that case that we should be cheering for the Islamists to take over? Because, I mean, look, if they actually ran a state like Syria, it would be potentially very dangerous for Israel.
No, listen, I don't think we should be cheering for either side. I think we should be cheering for both sides to lose. And so, let them go at each other. Let them weaken each other. And, I think we need to ensure that the Israelis have what they need in order to counter whatever radical organization or Iran-backed regime is controlling Syria. I think the Israelis are already launching airstrikes to ensure that the Iranians are not moving fighters and weapons into Syria. And the Israelis should be taking even more of the high ground in the Golan to ensure that if the rebels, the Syrian jihadists, move towards the Golan, they will be sitting ducks.
All right, let's move towards the Trump administration policy. Coming back into office, a much more unstable Middle East. How do you think the administration is going to approach it to try to restore some sense of stability and help our allies there against the adversaries?
Look, a much more unstable Middle East, Paul, but I also think the bright spot on this is a severely weakened Islamic Republic of Iran, thanks to Israeli military capabilities that have struck Iran directly and struck Iran's proxies, severely degrading Hezbollah, almost decimating Hamas. So I think there's a real opportunity working closely with the Israelis to undermine the Islamic Republic, which is the source of instability in the Middle East and is the most severe threat to U.S. interests, and then also to encourage the Israelis and the Saudis, the Emiratis and others to move even further towards peace and normalization. I think President-elect Trump has a real opportunity over the next 4 years to turn the Middle East into a region of greater stability that is no longer a severe threat to U.S. interests.
Should the start of the policy, at least at the beginning of the administration, be to restart the maximum pressure sanctions regime that was going in the first term until Biden stopped it against Iran?
Undoubtedly, Paul. I mean, I think the Trump administration needs to impose maximum pressure on the regime, but not just sanctions. I think there's a real opportunity to work with the Israelis on taking out Iran's nuclear weapons program, which is advancing in very dangerous ways. It's expanded enormously under President Biden's watch. And I think the Israelis now, having destroyed Iran's strategic air defenses, taken out a key nuclear weaponization facility inside Iran, taking out ballistic missile capabilities. I think we should be working with our Israeli friends on some kind of joint strike opportunity to take out the nuclear program, and then really run a program of both maximum pressure and maximum support for the Iranian people to severely weaken and degrade the regime itself.
All right, Mark Dubowitz, thanks so much for coming in and sharing that. Appreciate it.
Thank
Still
you, Paul.
ahead, the electric vehicle crack-up continues as the